of Miriam Cates.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I will try to keep my remarks brief because I know that there are a number who still wish to get in. And can I just start by paying tribute to the honourable member who's not in his place, who brought this bill, because he has engaged, as he said, very widely with a wide range of colleagues. And though he and I have had our moments in this chamber and it's been broadly publicised, I want everybody to know that behind the scenes we have had some very good, constructive, friendly conversations about this, and I do want to thank him sincerely for that and for the very, very mature and calm way he spoke today, which I think we all acknowledge. There are a number of issues with this bill that have been widely covered by a number of honourable members. I certainly will.
Specifically to the point, Mr Deputy Speaker, of the debate and the way it's been conducted, because I think it was reflected in the Minister's remarks as well, that actually what today's debate has managed to achieve, and what I have valued from this debate, is a surfacing of the issues and the complexities and concerns which are actually preventing, or at least delaying, the presentation of a bill in the Government's name to this House.
I completely agree with my honourable friend, and I think despite the wide range of views raised in this debate, we still have not established what it is that it is not yet already illegal that should be made illegal, and that is why I don't believe that this bill should make it progress through Parliament, and indeed I don't actually think this is an area where law can be brought safely at all. I don't want to rehash comments that other honourable members have made, but two particular concerns about the bill and its drafting. Firstly, we've already referred to the fact that a DPP would have to give permission for a prosecution to be brought. Now, on the face of it, that sounds like a sensible safeguard, and certainly it's a good thing that private prosecutions can't be brought. But if you look on the CPS website, it is clear that the permission of the DPP just means the permission of any Crown prosecutor, and all it would take is one Crown prosecutor who particularly wants to secure a conviction on these terms to bring that case. Case law would be made, and then, of course, the chilling effect that so many honourable members have referred to would indeed be achieved for parents, for teachers, for therapists. The other safeguard that is very much lacking in the bill as it is written is the ability for a Secretary of State to amend the bill through statutory instrument. In other words, a Henry VIII power. Now, given that a number of honourable members today, even though those who support the bill only support it because of the particular exemptions in the bill for therapists, for parents, for religious leaders, those exemptions could be stripped out by a Secretary of State through statutory instrument. And that in itself, I believe, makes this bill unsafe in terms of the ability in future to amend it beyond all recognition and all agreement of the House. My particular concerns are for parents who absolutely could be criminalised, sadly, under this bill. I agree that the honourable member has tried very hard to create these carve-out for parents. But if a parent, in exercising their parental responsibility, is found by a court to have committed an action that counts as conversion therapy, how would that court then find that that parent has been acting in the best interest of the welfare of the child? That seems highly unlikely to me, and very likely to lead to parents being prosecuted, or at the very least feeling that they are not able to speak freely to their children as they would wish in order to keep them safe and prevent them from making irreversible decisions. I'm also very concerned about therapists. Again, I can see that the honourable member who brought this bill has made a significant attempt to create carve-out for therapists who are delivering exploratory therapy, talking therapies. But unfortunately, the carve-out includes that a therapist must be acting within the regulations of whichever body to which they're affiliated. And unfortunately, the vast majority of these regulatory bodies, including the NHS, have signed up to a memorandum of understanding that essentially means that anything else but affirming a person's gender identity is against those regulations. So again, unfortunately, this exemption, though well meant, doesn't actually count for anything. So an example of the problem that this would cause, I met a lesbian lady last year who told me that she had experienced gender dysphoria since her teenage years, and she had sought out a private therapist to help her to come to terms with her own female body and to live happily, successfully as a lesbian woman with her partner. Now, she chose that therapist because that therapist had a predetermined purpose of helping her not to move to a transgender identity. Now, unfortunately, that therapist, who I think many of us would agree should absolutely be allowed to practice on those terms, would be criminalised under this legislation because that therapist has a predetermined purpose to suppress a transgender identity. And if that was made illegal, then this lady that I spoke to would no longer have access to that kind of therapy. And I think nobody in this place could really argue that that therapy is harmful and it is fully consensual, and we should not be criminalising those kind of conversations. I certainly will.
Thank you for giving way. Again, she's been very generous, and I commend her for the points she's making, because these are legitimate questions of which we ask of the bill. But perhaps you could answer this. It seems to me that in Clause 1, in the absence, or 1.1, in the absence of specificity about behaviours, and in the reliance on the interpretation in Clause 4 of those words purpose and intent, in effect we've got legislation here which is creating a form of thought crime.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And although honourable members have spoken about abuse and persistent patterns of behaviour, all of which are certainly serious, the reality is that in the drafting of the bill, a single act could be brought as a criminal offence. There are not sufficient safeguards in this bill to prevent that from happening. For example, if I were a primary school teacher and a girl came to me and said that she felt she was actually a boy and that she'd been born in the wrong body, if I said to her on one occasion, no, actually, you are a girl, it's great being a girl, you know, maybe she's gender non-conforming in some way and thinks that means she's not really female. If I said that to her once, I probably wouldn't be caught by this bill. But if I said that to her repeatedly, in other words, if I told her the truth and guided her as adults should guide children, I very much would be caught by this bill, especially if I was a gender-critical feminist who had put things on social media that proves that I don't believe in gender identity ideology, for example. Those are exactly the kind of behaviours that we absolutely cannot criminalise in a democratic and free society. But parents and children are my principal concern here. And Mr. Speaker, over the last 2 years, my inbox has been full of tragic stories of children, often girls, often same-sex attracted, often autistic, who have been groomed online and often by activist groups, sometimes in schools, into believing that they're actually boys. And some of these children, sadly, have gone on to be prescribed puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. Some are actively pursuing radical surgery that will leave them infertile, unable to breastfeed, and with medical problems for the rest of their life. Now, it's already difficult enough for parents, teachers, employees to speak out against this ideology. And the Honourable Member for Summer in Scotland put this point absolutely brilliant, that the backdrop of this... Thank you very much. That the backdrop of this debate, the backdrop of this legislation, is one very much where gender ideology has pervaded our culture and our institutions, and that is what parents are battling against. So one mother wrote to me, "My daughter began identifying as a boy at age 13, following a presentation by a trans adult in her school, all kept secret. Hers is the classic story: puberty, autistic traits, severe bullying, same-sex attraction. She was socially transitioned without our consent and then referred with our consent to the Tavistock. The GP later told me she didn't support medicalisation due to the lack of evidence, but feared for her job if she said so. In the 4 years since, I've been referred to social services 3 times for being abusive, but deemed each time by social workers to be a loving mother. My daughter's trans identity has been celebrated at school and supported by mainly male teachers, one of whom told her he likes to cross-dress on the weekend. She learned she is 48% likely to attempt suicide and that her family is committing hate crimes. This has not been good for her mental health or ours. My other daughters are 14 and 7. They too have learned about gender identity theory at school and have been interviewed by social services each time we're referred. Our last school, which proudly displayed its Stonewall Champion certificate behind the reception desk, went even further. Every time I had safeguarding questions, they just told me about equality, diversity and inclusion and British values. They enrolled my daughter as male and sent her to secret therapy since I was considered a risk. We have somehow managed to prevent her from accessing irreversible medical and surgical interventions despite everyone else's best efforts. The way I would describe my experience as a mother is that my daughter jumped in front of a train, so I jumped in front of her and got hit by the train. Intercepting letters from the NHS being referred repeatedly to social services and being socially ostracised have been worth it. Buying time has allowed her to go through puberty and consider whether it is autism that makes her feel different. For now, at least, she has decided not to pursue more drastic options. If my actions had been criminalised, I don't think she would have been in the fortunate position she is now, living at home with her loving family, with her body, fertility and mind intact. And Mr Deputy Speaker, I have countless other testimonies like that, which I do not have time to read out now, but some of them are absolutely heartbreaking, and some of them do not end like that. Some of them end with permanent severing of the relationship between parent and child, with the child taken down a route of permanent harm against the parent's best intentions. But before I finish, I just want to make clear that I think, unfortunately, at the heart of this bill is an irreconcilable difference between those of us who support this bill and those of us who don't. And I think the difference is this, that if you believe that it is not possible to change sex, if you believe that it is not possible to be born in the wrong body, then how do we define this concept of transgender identity? And I appreciate the honourable member has referred to a different bill, the Sentencing Act 2020. But unfortunately, if you read that bill, it doesn't attempt to define these terms. It certainly refers to these terms, and it talks about them as aggravating factors in assault, which of course they should be. And it tells the court to make account of the fact if someone has used some transphobic abuse or referred to somebody as transgender or transsexual during assault, that should be an aggravating factor. But that isn't a definition of transgender or transgender identity. And the truth is you can't define it because it is something that is felt. And whilst people might very well feel it very strongly, if it can't be defined in law, how can we safely legislate for it? How can you ban someone from converting someone to or from transgender if you can't define transgender? And if, like me, you believe that gender ideology is not based on fact, it's not based on evidence, and therefore we should be telling children that they can't change sex, then we should be helping them to live happily in their own sex, however that means they want to dress, whatever hobbies they want to pursue, then how can we legislate for it if we don't think it's real? That is the problem at the heart of this bill, and why we cannot safely legislate in this space, and why we absolutely mustn't be putting these, I'm afraid, contested and unevidenced ideas into law.
Lynn Brown.